I'd like to thank the organizers of this LAVIS conference for this session on language in the schools. The previous two LAVIS conferences had papers on language in the schools, but this is the first session that has been organized. And it follows some that have been recently organized by other professional organizations like the Linguistic Society of America and the National Teachers of English. And this presence of sessions at our professional organizations, I think, recognizes a growing concern about the teaching of language structure across English-speaking countries. And if you just take a look at the references I've provided, Hudson 1999 has a very good article about the dearth of language teaching, about English language teaching in Great Britain, which is a great surprise to me. I always think they do it right, but for 50 years they have not been teaching about language structure either. Wheeler, 1999, in a number of articles in one collection and in her book in the other collection, talks about how we have not paid attention to language structure since I started teaching in 1958. And Mulder has provided with her associates a couple of very good texts specific to Australia and done by one state in Australia, and I'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute. When she reported to our group at LSA, she said that they had talked about doing a nationwide text about Australian English for the schools, but that only her state of Victoria was interested. And so they just went ahead and did it on their own. Now, Australia and Britain have centralized education systems, unlike ours, where every district is a law unto itself. And in many ways, it's easier to implement from the top a program like that in a nation like either Great Britain or Australia. But there are some advantages to the chaos that we experience, and I'll talk about them also. I also want to call your attention to a recent book by Haussmann with Amy Benjamin and Martha Cole and Rebecca Wheeler, which I think is the single best book for teachers to come out in my lifetime. It's by the National Council of Teachers of English. It gives a survey about where we are, and it gives some very practical teaching tips for a classroom, both in the lower grades and in the secondary school. And it also provides an overview of some traditional language concepts by Martha Cole and some linguistic aspects. You know, there's been this tension, which is probably why we've not had a well thought out curriculum in the schools, between the traditional Latin-based grammar, the prescriptivist that Kirk was talking about, and the grammar that has been increasingly discovered piece by piece as we talked about it at this conference by linguists, and looking at how language is really used. So Martha Cole in this Haussmann book gives an overview of both some of the traditional concepts and the newer ones, that in a way that's quite accessible to us all. I want to start by outlining a problem that faces us all, and this is the result of our past half century of not having any systematic curriculum in the schools. We have students who are not prepared to understand one of the fundamental things that make us human. And Kirk alluded to that when he talks about how we started the 20th century with no concept of gravity and ended it with that's something everybody knows about. it's time now to do the same thing for language. And as he says, it's not intuitive. So we're going to have to lay some groundwork both in the universities and in the schools. And I want to suggest that we need a two-pronged approach to this. First of all, we need revisions of our university class on language structures or the intro to linguistics so that it shows teachers how to teach rather than tells them. And secondly, we need a collaboration between university and school teachers to develop a new language structure curricula for the schools. And we have seen at this conference, and we'll hear from Wolfram and his colleagues shortly, about materials that have been collected over the past half century, very exciting ways of showing our students how language is actually used in their homes, in their communities, and by other people that they don't know. So let me address these 2 points, these 2 needs in turn. The revisions of the university class is one that I've experienced firsthand after 2 decades of trying to teach the introductory classes to prospective teachers, and then after going and supervising them in the fields, I discovered to my horror that they were teaching the way I taught them. And I've worked, I've revised and revamped and used new techniques now for about 20 years. And what I want to suggest is that we start right off with introducing our students to doing field work as a way of framing the course. If you just tell them about language structure, they're going to go do the same thing with their students. That's been my experience, and I've never been so bored watching a class like that, and so embarrassed. I ended my career by picking up an idea from Susan Irvin Tripp, who taught psycholinguistics at Berkeley for many years, and she had students who had no linguistics background, but what she had them do from the beginning of this class was to make 1 or 2 recordings of family members or friends and use that recorded conversation for analyzing discourse throughout the course. And she told me how she did it and how she marked it. She has left an archive at Berkeley that's phenomenal of student-family conversations over the years. She delayed her retirement because the students were getting so interesting at Berkeley. But what I did then was go into my beginning class and say, go home and take your tape recorder. Everybody has them now. Or I made some available if they didn't, but everybody had them. And record at least 2 conversations, and I gave them a bounded time limit, at least this long and not any longer than this after I had some failures.